Um, so today on this online workshop and webinar, we will be doing an honest review on the DMP, so data management plans, and we'll be calling them DMPs for the rest of this presentation. So first, I will introduce research data and DMPs. So basically a bit talking a bit of maybe contextualizing for people who are not too familiar with the DMPs and research data. I will be presenting DMP tools, so mainly DMP Online. However, most of the DMP tools are built similarly to DMP Online. And then Benjamin will be talking about the challenges of DMPs, the best practices, and we will end with a Q&A. If you have any question at one point, you can write it in the discussion, and then we'll go back to the question at the end of the presentations. So to begin, what is research data? Research data can have multiple forms. It can be observational data, experimental data, numerical simulation data, derived compiled data. It can be software. It can be just code. It can be text. It really is anything that helps you for your research, helps you write your articles, anything that has that value. So really, it's quite there's not really a definition. It's quite large for this research data. This research data, usually we talk then about the data management lifecycle that I've shown here. So it really starts when you have a research project here, where you create, capture, and collect your data. Then you organize and store your data, you use it, you analyze it, you share it. And so here is basically where at the end of one project, you do everything here. And then here is when you presented your article or you submitted it or anything like that. And then you share your data. Then you can reuse the data. So either you reuse it or someone else reuses it. And then you can end by archiving it or destroying it, depending of which data you have. If it's sensitive data, maybe you should consider destroying it. If it's not, then you can archive it in some repositories or anything of such. So here is a main example of really why we try to manage our data better and why we have to write, well, not have to write, but is why we try to write DMPs. A bad data management can lead to a loss of data over the years, especially when the data is no longer used. So here it is a little graphic to show you really the drop that there is between when the article is submitted and then the older the article is. So the older the article is, the more missing data there is. So that is why it is important to write data management plans so that you know where your data is archived, where you can find your data, and so it avoids missing data. Or for example, if you put your data only in one computer and then that computer doesn't work anymore and then you lose your data, these data management plans and data management can help you have a better idea of how to use your data and how to put it somewhere so it doesn't end up being lost. So here I will talk about the necessity of DMPs. So DMPs are a key element of good data management, of course. In some funding programs, it is mandatory. So for example, in the Horizon fundings and in some national funding programs. So for example, I'm in France and the ANR, so it is mandatory in the ANR programs. And it has to cover all the data lifecycle. So it is usually you have to submit 3 different DMPs, one in the 6 first months of the project, one at the mid-project, and then one at the end. So it is something that can change, and there can be parts where you, at the beginning of the project, you don't really know how you're going to do it or like which repository you're going to use, etc. And so that is why you have to submit multiple DMPs so that at the end you can Well, some things you can talk about and then use them for later. So it has to cover all of this. It has to cover all of this. This is what a data management plan covers. So there is, of course, the project description where you put the types of project needed. Data acquisition, where here is the production, the collection of data, the data needed for the project. We'll have to describe your data using metadata, documentation. This is really so that anyone who reads your DMP can understand really what your data is and how it is used. And for example, if there is an Excel file, how you can read the file. It has to cover every legal issue and ethic issue. So licensee, privacy, confidentiality, consent restrictions. So this is, so usually in university, you should have a legal department and someone will have to, and someone will help you with all these legal issues that you may have and that you may not be aware of. Then you have the data curation. So here is really to see if it is interoperable. I think Benjamin will be talking about that a bit later. And then the storage and sharing, where you will share it, how it can be found, where it is stored, in which format, and etc. So the GMP really covers all of this. Um, if possible, you should ask your university if they have a team or someone responsible of this of the data management plans who can help you on all of this, because it is tough to write a data management plan alone because there are many aspects involved. So now I will present DMP Online. So of course you should ask your university if there is a tool they recommend or a tool that they use. DMP Online is web-based, it is free to use, collaborative, and there are many variations depending of essentially where your university is and what your university uses. So DMP Online is developed by the Digital Curation Center. Many European universities are listed in this in DMP Online. The DMP template that is given is compliant to the demands of the funding agency. So this is quite important, so that it really helps you when you don't have to write a DMP from scratch. It can be used with multiple collaborators where both people, many people can write at the same time, a bit like a Google Doc can be used. Universities can often propose workshops on DMP Online or the tool that they use. So DMP Online, when you connect on DMP Online, you'll have this little page. So you can either create your account, or if you have institutional credentials, you can connect directly here. So you should check the universities that are involved in this. If you don't find university, it is probably that they use another software, another tool. So really ask your university what they use. So you would like to create a new plan. You have to give the name of your research project, which organization is the primary research organization. So here I put Dublin because my university is not listed in this one because this is not the tool we use. And then you have to select the primary funding organization. So I've created a little plan, I called it research project. I put the ERC template. I am the owner, and you can also click on this little button so that you can test it. And so this means you can change anything you want and it won't be visible to anybody except you, so that you can really see how it works if it's your first DMP or if you're interested or just seeing how it basically works. Here on the actions, you can edit your project, you can delete it, you can download it, you can share it, you can copy it, and there is also the test mode. So here we created our research project. So I clicked here a mock project for text testing, practice, etc. You can not click here if it is your real DMP. So you have to give a little abstract, the project abstract, the project start and end, IDs, etc. Everything that helps to identify this project. Here you can also select the guidance you want to use. So to help write your plans, it can show your guidance from a variety of organization. So by default, the Digital Curation Center will be selected. And you can see all the organizations who decided to put some guidelines. So your own university could put some guidelines, or other universities put guidelines, and you're interested to see, oh, maybe they can help me and have more information if I have a bit of a if I have some problems or some struggles, or it's just my first DMP and I really would like to have more information. And so when you click on see the full list, you can see all the universities that put some guidelines, and then they can help you for the for the rest of the DMP. You can add contributors. Sorry, you can add some contributors where you put their information, affiliation, and then the role they have, depending on what roles you gave everybody in your project at the beginning of the project. So you have a plan overview of so I put the ERC DMP, and this is the template so provided by the ERC. And so here they give all the information on what the funder expects from the DMP. And so this can really help when you're writing your DMP, so you better understand what they are expecting, and so how you can write your DMP. And so, as I said, this is an overview of the funder obligations. So now you want to start writing your plan. So this is the template they give you for the ERC one. So there is the summary and fair data and resources. And then, so it will follow all the fair, so make findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And so here you can start writing whatever you want for making the data findable. And here, so you have the little guidelines, as I said, of the ERC and other universities that you can use. So here they tell you, oh, it's a data set description, etc. So you can really understand better how to write your GMP thanks to that. So as you can see, it is a structured document, and this is really helpful if you really don't know how to write your GMP or where to start. You have these guidelines from the university, but there can also be comments, and in the comment section it can be the collaborators, the contributors, and also so it can be your university, the administrator. You have a little question, you click on the question, and the person can comment directly here, so that you know where the comment is and you don't really have to exchange emails and whatnot. So now I've written my plan and I'd like to share it. I can set the plan visibility. Either I want it private, or it can be anyone in my organization can view, or just public, where it'll be on the public DMPs page. Here you can have the collaborators, and you can invite collaborators. So this is really like the Google Doc, where you can have a co-owner, an editor, someone who can only read. So this is what I think is a very nice option on this DMP Online, is that anybody you invite can edit or read the DMP, so that you don't have to share it all over the place and you don't really remember who's sharing it. And so it's a quite nice tool to use. And then at the end, you can download your research project. So there are different formats. It can be PDF, it can be docx, etc. You have multiple option plans. For example, if you want to keep them, if you want to keep some questions you haven't answered, etc. You can change the font. So this is this was really an overview of the DMP Online, and there are other websites that are based on DMP Online. So really depending of your funding agency. So for example, DMP Tool is one that is most used for North American funded projects. And in France, the one we use is DMP Opidor. So for French funded projects, but you can also use it for European funded projects if your university is in the is using DMP Opidor. And so you can see that the layout is really the same than DMP Online. So I finished my part. So now, Benjamin, you can share your screen if you'd like.
Can everyone see me? Wait a second. And to see my presentation, I start from the beginning. Can you see my presentation? Sorry, that's the first question in those times.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jordan. I'm going to talk about the second. I'm going to talk about the second part within this presentation, and I'm going to talk about the challenges faced and about best practices. As I mentioned before, I work as a senior advisor for open science and research data at the Norwegian School of Economics, ENGAGE. The topics are the following. I'm going to talk about the challenges using the online DMP tools. Then what is fair? I think that is one of the major questions we are facing when we are talking about data. Then the challenge as well, how to make your data fair, basically how to follow up the DMPs. Then I'm going to talk about general challenges faced and how to achieve best practices. My background, as I mentioned before, I have been doing data management since 2001 with various data centers. Established a data center, have been working about parts, and around here, 2016, I think that was a time when I was first challenged with, do I provide the first data management plans within different external funded projects from the Research Council of Norway or the European Commission. Back then, they were more voluntary based, and they became mandatory in 2019. But as Jordan has shown, that is basically the online, the DMP online tool. First of all, it is not a critic to those tools. They really try to find the bridge between the obligations that come from the funders side and to make them usable and how to make them understandable towards scientists. So I think that is all those tools are great, but I'm just simply to talk about the challenges, and they reflect my own experience and are not necessarily the view of NHH. So the plan is basically how to provide a data management plan. You have a nice flow chart, you have the computer, basically the tool that aims you, and then all those processes should go in the background and basically should be interconnected. And if you basically start to write a DMP, I started to use a different template. I didn't choose the ERC template. I used the template from the European Commission for external funded larger projects. The first parts are quite easy. You provide project details. You provide information about the contributors. You give an overview that is kind of like, okay, this one is the Horizon Europe template. And then you start to write the plan. And within this template, you can see here all those different parts you have to address: the data summary, fair data, other research outputs, allocation of resources, data security, ethics, and other parts. But you can see that the major emphasis is on fair data. In this template, 25 questions are addressed on how to make your data fair. And here I'm going to talk about some of the example questions. And we have to keep in mind that those tools are meant for scientists to write the data management plan. So one of those questions asked is how to make data findable, including provisions for metadata. Will data be identified by a persistent identifier? Well, we all know about DOIs and other persistent identifiers, and yes, they can be provided, but we continue with the questions that how to make data findable, including provisions for metadata. Will search keywords be provided in the metadata to optimize the possibility for discovery and potential reuse? Then we talk about other parts. Will data be offered in such a way that it can be harvested and indexed? Will data be accessible through a free and standardized access protocol? And so on and so on. Especially now we're talking about metadata vocabulary, standards, formats, methodologies. And we have to keep in mind that those questions, there are a few more coming about ontologies and vocabularies. Those questions are asked during the process to write a data management plan. And those are towards the scientist that normally owns the research project. So the challenges faced using those tools, for example, DMP Online, that scientists are often supposed to use a template, but expert knowledge is often needed. I have not encountered researchers that would would be able to answer all those questions, because most of the questions couldn't be solely maybe answered just by the long-term archive if they archive the data. So there need to be a collaboration that place, and often the scientist is not able to answer that one. Then the other question, problem is that most of the answers are free text. You have guidance available, but I know me, I hardly never read on the guidance if it's too much on that level. And especially we have to keep in mind that the example DMP template, the one I used for the expert, I think there was 31 questions. The other one had 41 questions to answer during the plan. I do not expect people to use the time to read all of the guidance that is available and provide all of those free text answers. And then the other challenge is that many know the term fair, but lack details what is meant for the data. 25 questions, as I mentioned before, addressed fair and how to make data fair. So one of the challenges during the process of not just writing a DMP, but being able to write DMP is as well to know what is needed to come from my data to fair data. So basically we have the scientists that has their data. Within the DMP, they're asked to make their data fair, so findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. And then we have all of those different steps between the data lifecycle that Jordan already mentioned in his presentation. All of those with FAIR is based upon one article that was published in 2016. And it was more or less like a earthquake for science on that level, because the paper basically mentioned that there's an urgent need to improve the infrastructure supporting the reuse of scholarly data. And a diverse set of stakeholders designed and endorsed a conceived and measurable set of principles, the FAIR data principles. Those are guidelines for those wishing to enhance the reusability of the data. And they put the specific emphasis on enhancing the ability of machines to automatically find and use the data. So that is something we have to keep in mind. Most of those questions that are being asked in the DMP, they're meant on how to make data fair from the machine side, basically to make the data machine readable. And in case that people do not know the details, those are the 17 parts that need to be actually considered. And those are actually the baseline for many of the questions within the detailed DMP and that are being addressed and how to make data fair. So one thing that I want you to remember, the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability is not just for the metadata, it's for the data itself. So it's about structured data as well, if the data can be structured. That's another problem, that some of the data, they not even maybe specialized vocabularies exist for certain types of data. One term that is always being misunderstood is the term interoperability, what is meant by it. And I would simply consider it like streaming. I mean, we go on YouTube and Netflix to watch a movie. We don't buy a DVD anymore. We simply try to watch it online. And actually, those features can be nearly done with scientific data as well. So basically, scientific data could be integrated into our workflow. So basically, we don't download data. We always have the latest version of a data set, of a larger data set online from a long-term archive, directly integrated into our MATLAB or Python routines and basically stream the data. So that is meant with interoperability, being able to access data directly from one machine to another machine and directly integrated into the workflow. But how to manage research data according to the data lifecycle? I mean, we are talking about to the FAIR principle. So we talked about data lifecycle. We talked about FAIR data, that funding agencies require to provide a DMP, and that should state what should be done with the data. But the main important thing is, while writing a DMP, is that we realize that resources are needed in order to fulfill those obligations. Most of the research funding agencies, they have an estimated cost of 5% of the received funding, and it's actually an eligible cost as well for external funded projects. Those are the ones that are really important. That information is important to keep in mind, because in order to provide a DMP, to follow it up and to do everything, money is needed. The FAIR guiding principles basically have been rapidly adopted by publishers, funders, all infrastructures and societies. They present guidelines for the publication of a digital resource. They are aspirational, that do not strictly define how to achieve the state of fairness. That's one of the issues as well, that nobody tells you really what is needed in detail for your data to make it fair. They describe features, attributes, and behaviors that will move the digital resource closer to that goal. And that's another problem, is there's a wide interpretation of fairness in different disciplines. So that's another part. Nobody really tells you what is needed for your data and how to make it fair. There's a lot of confusion, and I think all of the researchers at least I have encountered, everybody's confused about the term fair. And there are as well different methodologies how to assess fairness, and they have been already adopted. And that one information is based from another article by the same author, by Wilkinson et al., about the fairness for data. This is something I made for another presentation at one point. In order to make data fair, we have to keep in mind that some of these obligations are obligations for the long-term archive. For example, here in blue, those are the typical obligations that are needed to make data fair, and that is more or less the obligations of the long-term archive if you choose to, or if you have to publish your data. The green part, now it comes in different color, apologies. So the orange part here in this type, they are more or less the obligations by the scientific community, basically by the scientists and data managers involved. So we have to make sure that those parts are being done actually as a collaborative effort in order to make data really fair. And I would more or less compare it always like to a nut and the shell. It's the content, basically the data, in order to make it reusable and so on, and that it really fits to all the features that are needed to make it fair. That is more like the nut on that level, and the outer shell is more or less the infrastructure that provided. And without having just not good content, the long-term archives cannot really do their performance. And without a good archive to protect basically the internal content, you cannot really manage the data accordingly. We have to keep in mind that we actually need critical support staff on permanent positions to assist scientists. Many of those tasks cannot be done by scientists. And we actually have to ensure as well that science is not detached from technology, and that scientists trust the services offered through fairnesses. That is the essential part, that we have to ensure that the content of the data sets is kept to the best possible, is basically the best possible content that is available. And one of those parts has been done, for example, in the ENGAGE R&I network. We have partners from the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands, they have been working towards how to establish professional data stewards in the Netherlands, and basically that they offer training and education. And it's more or less on the Dutch roadmap towards a national implementation of the fair data stewardship. Parts of this has been adopted in other countries, but I think we have to recognize that long-term or permanent positions are needed in the long term in order to make data fair and to give as much assistance to the scientists. If you go to the Go Fair initiative, that is more or less an initiative to make data fair. They basically state that 5% of the research funding is needed in order to make data fair and how to assist scientists. They also state that it will actually save a lot of time if you want to reuse the data, because you do it one time properly and people can reuse it, you reuse it, instead of that everybody has to reformat the data itself to make it reusable again. We also have to consider that if you say it takes 5% of research funding, that sounds more or less like a threat to many universities. But at the same time, we already have a lot of support staff fulfilling the role of data stewards, but it should be more or less organized in a more systematic approach. As I mentioned before, I have a background in data management, and now we come to some fun facts. I wrote around 50 data management plans, and I never received feedback from any of the funding agency if the content I provided was okay. So I talked to colleagues working in the field, and many have the same issues. They provide a data management plan, they do not get any of the feedback, and the problem is that you have a lot of free text, so we don't really know if the free text provided is really what the funding agencies or the reviewers want to know. So it's a more or less like a guessing or hoping that everything is okay. Then many projects need a DMP as a key performance indicator. I have been reviewing applications for high performance computing in Norway for one of the major providers for HPC. And I have been reviewing, I read around 150 DMPs, and I have to say, the content is quite diverse. Hardly none of them, the information is consistent. And I think the worst example was that every single one of those free text boxes, there was a to be determined, to be determined, to be determined. It was approved because nobody really said what should be provided in the free text. So I think we should move away from free text and we should more or less share our information. Then DMPs are often living documents, like as Jordan stated, they should be reviewed at whatever months, provided month 6 and then reviewed, but this is often not followed up. The other problem is that people do not share the DMPs, and I think that's part of the uncertainty because we do not receive feedback, so we don't really know if the information provided is okay, and if we don't really know if it's okay, we have a hesitation to share it. Then it's an extra burden for the researcher to provide a DMP. We have to consider like all the questions you have to address. And if you don't really know the answer, it's a burden. And often internal discipline specific support staff is needed in order to do those ones. I know that many universities have basic classes and teach how to provide or how to write DMP, and often through the library system, but if you would ask details about ontologies, standardized vocabularies, nobody's able to answer those ones because we're talking about diverse fleet of disciplines involved. And how to move towards best practices. We should share our DMPs in the specific domains, and there should be actually a pool of DMPs. And ideally, there should be a pool of DMPs from the various universities that they always can ensure that we provide the same information within the DMP. Some are domain specific, but many are quite alike. So I think we should move towards that, especially that the free text is often pre-filled with certain text that could be provided, for example, from the library or the research administration. We should ensure consistency, for example, to develop domain-specific collaboration and develop best practices for DMPs. We should have internal reviews for DMPs, for example, that within the research administration of an organization that we always approve the DMPs that are provided from the organization, that we can ensure that they come to a certain level of consistency. We have to keep in mind that critical support staff for assisting and following up DMPs is needed, and that we should set aside funding for data management. And many of those tasks that are mentioned in the best practices are actually addressed within the ENGAGE.EU and R&I work package 5 about data management, and we will work towards best practices within the field. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Benjamin. So now we can start any questions. If anybody has any questions on what was presented.
You can also type your questions in the chat. That may be easier in some cases.
Yes, Ines. I can't hear you. I don't know if it's just me.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, sorry, wrong mic. Okay. I found it very interesting when you talked about interoperability, and you defined it as having the data, always the newest version of the data available online and accessible. it's, for me, it was interesting because in my field, we usually discuss interoperability more in terms of data formats, that we have the data in a format that we can exchange. So we often have data sets that tackle the same task or encode the same information, so that we use a format that we can exchange and add different data sets. Would you also consider that as part of interoperability?
Yes, I think that is the first step of interoperability, because we need a consistent data set, and then basically how to build up services on the data that can expect that the data can be exchanged. In my previous position, we developed services towards European Open Science Cloud, and then it's more or less that we make sure that data is in formats that's basically as you presented it, but at the same time that the long-term archives can basically set up services upon those standardized data sets, data formats, that data can be actually exchanged. We have to keep in mind that everything is meant for machine-to-machine data exchange. So the basis is basically to have a common data format for the data itself, have a common, use common vocabularies that the machine could interpret what is really meant with the different columns and so on, and that data can be actually exchanged on a larger basis. So all of those tasks that you mentioned, they're actually about the interoperability, and I think they are as well mentioned in the different details about within the FAIR data management principles.
Thanks.
But that highlights as well that what is really meant with FAIR really changes from domain to domain as well. So if you work with big data, there are different needs than you would maybe work with data where hardly nobody else works on the same types of data. I think it kind of reflects the diversity in science to some extent.
Yes, Ines.
Okay, I have another one. Benjamin, you talked about the challenge of the text fields, and that you would think it would make a lot of sense to have more structured, to have a way to collect the information in a more structured way. Is that even feasible? Have there been efforts towards doing that? How could you imagine that this would work? Would you have certain questions for different disciplines?
I think it's about how to develop best practices for various disciplines and how to make them maybe to go away from free text towards more predefined choices. I think it is possible for many projects or many different fields of science, while it will be never possible to do it for everything. But I think to some extent, many of those free text boxes that could be removed. For example, if you talk about findability, if you would simply say, well, what are you going to use? Are you going to use DOIs? Are you going to use what kind of PIDs are you going to use? I think certain parts could be done. Mm-hmm. Then at the same time, if you would come towards a domain-specific field, and then you can say like, okay, what are the main vocabularies or ontologies being used? And you could have drop-down boxes. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be the easiest way, and especially how to guide the scientists towards that level. File format, certain parts I think could be easily implemented to some extent, and they could be improved towards better services in the future. We have to keep in mind that there are many projects, especially within the European Commission, that are funded towards the European Open Science Cloud. And the European Open Science Cloud is basically essential that data is being made fair, that basically that data is being made interoperable, reusable, and so on. So I think with that one, we should work more towards the content of the data files. And I think then those parts are needed. And I think they could be easily structured. And I think that would be needed in order to how to make really to give better assistance for the scientists. Quite often they do not know what is being needed, or that there are actually different vocabularies being used in different fields, and there should be mapping between the different vocabularies. So I think a lot of funding should be set aside to develop better tools that would guide the researchers or the data managers, data stewards in a better way.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Well, there are not many questions coming up, but maybe someone wants to share their experience while writing a data management plan, or if they were asked if their support staff joining this meeting, if they had experience while they were supposed to assist the scientists. I mean, we are just 19 people, so I think we could take it more in a more informal direction as well if somebody wants to share the experience.
Irene sent a message on the discussion. She says we often have questions from researchers saying, I would like to make my data fair, but it's sensitive data, so we can't. I think there is still a huge perception of fair means open.
Yes, I think that's a typical problem that people always assume that data fair means that data has to be open, but actually data can be totally fair, but not be open as well. It could be, for example, that the metadata could be fair, but the content of the data cannot be fair. There are many articles dealing with this kind of data, and I think that is another part that people are afraid. That's an uncertainty as well from the scientists, that they are obliged to make, that they read the data management plan, they read fair, and they're worried that I have sensitive data I'm not allowed to share. What should I do now? So basically, you can write data management plan that can be 100% accepted, that is totally fair, but the data does not need to be open. So I think that's something we should keep in mind as well. Thank you.
So if there are any other questions, go ahead. But if there are not, well, there are no more questions. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning for this workshop. It was very happy. There were still a bit of questions, and I hope we were able to help you, and maybe now you have maybe a better idea of what are DMPs and what is fair data. And we probably might be doing we might be doing another presentation. We don't have the date yet, but we probably will be doing a follow-up presentation. And yes, to answer Ruth Kreutz, the video recorded will be available. Maybe Ines, you can tell us where it might be. Or I mean, if you know where it might be.
Oh, not. I don't know already. We were thinking about having a dedicated website, but it doesn't exist yet. But I guess once we have it, we will announce it on the ENGAGE.EU research platform.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.